Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of Cool Tools. We've made 18 of these so far, going all the way back to 2016, each with about 5 tools that we think are worth sharing because we find them handy in our workshop or because they represent real innovations in the woodworking world. I started this series because I like to talk about tools, and I knew some of you did too. But I never expected how popular the Cool Tools series would become. Millions of woodworkers have watched these videos, and I often hear from them about what tools they thought were the coolest. Now that winter's upon us, woodworking season has begun. More folks are in their shops from November through May than all the rest of the year. So we're going to kick off woodworking season with 3 special editions of Cool Tools. This week we'll show you some of the all-time favorites from past episodes based on audience responses. Next week we'll show you the best cheap tools we've ever featured. And around the new year we'll have a very special edition that contains some of the most expensive, drool-inducing woodworking tools you've ever wished you'd owned. As always, we disclose any sponsors involved at the beginning of the video, and we put affiliate links in the description below the video so you can check out any of these cool tools for yourself. Now let's get started with the best cool tools from the last 18 episodes. Woodworking and metalworking have a lot in common. We use many of the same tools, for example, such as drill presses and lathes, and a metalworker's mill is little more than a very precise router. But there's one tool in particular that's been a favorite of metalworkers for generations, and we woodworkers would do well to adopt it. It's the 1-2-3 block. These little blocks of steel are precisely machined to 1 inch thick, 2 inches wide, and 3 inches long. They come in solid and Swiss cheese styles, and once you start using them, you'll wonder how you got along without them for so long. Think of it as a big setup block. I've been using the small brass setup blocks for years, and adding a set of 2 1-2-3 blocks greatly expanded my capabilities. At the table saw, they really come in handy. I lay a 1-2-3 block against the edge of my blade's teeth, and I can precisely set the fence to 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, and with the addition of the fractional brass blocks, I can get virtually any measurement in between. I can use them to set the blade's height in the same way. And since they're perfectly square, I can also check that the blade is perpendicular to the table. I can use one of the blocks to recalibrate the cursor on my table saw fence because I know exactly how wide it is. I can even use it as a reference block for making repeated cuts, merely adding 3 inches to my desired measurement, setting the fence, and safely making the cuts with room for the pieces to pile up next to the blade without one kicking back at me. Many of these same techniques can be carried over to the router table, particularly bit height adjustments and fence setup. And don't forget that they work well in tandem with those brass setup bars for finer measurements. At the drill press table, they can be used to set boring depth, check that the spindle is running true. One of the holes can be used to protect your table from a bit passing through a workpiece, and that just scratches the surface. Because some styles have tapped holes in them, you can easily attach them to jigs, attach them to each other in various configurations. I use them for all sorts of creative purposes. And don't forget that they're as precise as a Machinist square, which makes them even more useful in your woodworking projects. I like to keep a set of 2 with holes in them, along with a set of brass setup keys on hand, but I also like to have another 1-2-3 block that doesn't have any holes in it. In fact, this one is a solid piece of machined steel. I like the solid one for very specific uses because of its extra weight. This thing weighs almost 2 pounds. We're talking levels of precision that were once only available to metal workers, but now woodworkers are starting to take advantage of these great tools. I'll put links in the notes below so that you can check out the 1-2-3 blocks and related accessories for yourselves. Let me be straight with you. Get it? Every woodworker needs a good straight edge. They're usually really expensive, but lately I've been using these aluminum ones. I got mine at a woodworking show, and I just love them. They're lightweight and well machined. I know they're straight because I can put 2 of them together and I can't see any light between them. That's straight enough for woodworking. I use them for tool setups, such as at the jointer, or to level the wings on my table saw, or to check a long workpiece for flatness. I even use them occasionally as winding sticks to gauge the twist in a board. I especially like the way they're molded, which makes them easy to hold so you don't drop them, which could compromise the precision of any precision straight edge. Mine are gold, color, not actual gold, but there are some on Amazon that are exactly the same, but black. If you've been looking for an affordable, accurate straight edge, I'll put a link in the notes below this video. I've been using these Duragrit carbide sanding blocks for several years now, and I showed one in a video once and people went nuts. They wanted to know more about them, and Really, I was surprised how few people had ever heard of sanding with carbide. I'm talking about actual chunks of carbide attached to steel plates. These last many, many, many times longer than the sandpaper, and they're great for leveling, shaping, and fast sanding. They come in all different shapes and styles, but the ones I reach for the most are the sanding blocks. These are especially great for easing edges, creating chamfers. The side of the block is square to the sanding surface, so you can use them to shape edges without getting out of plumb, sort of like a hand plane and a shooting board. They're fast to grab for quick sanding tasks, there's no paper to change, and they're not going to tear on you like paper will. Seriously, I'll put a link in the notes below this video. Get just one. Try one of the sanding blocks, 80 grit if you're only going to get one. Put it on a shelf next to your bench and see how often you reach for it. You'll see what I mean. A while back we made a video about temporarily attaching a small machinist vise to your woodworking bench. Every woodworker needs a vise to hold metal objects like pieces of flat bar or T-track or even bolts you need to trim with a hacksaw. It's so useful that I thought you might want to know which vise I use. This one is made by Yost. It's a small size, the jaw opens to 4.5 inches, but that's just right for the sort of small metalworking tasks you might do in a woodworking shop. And I like the compact size for storing when I'm not using it. There's a little flat area on the back that can be used as an anvil, but I keep a small portable anvil in the shop too, so I don't use my vise for that. I like the Yost version because it's rugged and tough, but also pretty affordable. And it'll work with some of the magnetic jaws that are out there. These are useful for holding pipe and rods or for when you need some padding, that sort of thing. I'll link to the vise and the jaws in the notes below the video so you can check them out for yourself. It's been 7 years since Stanley reintroduced their 750 Sweetheart chisels. A lot of people held back on these because when they came out, they were pretty expensive. But now, 7 years later, the price for a set has come down significantly if you know where to look. So, is it time to give them a serious look? And what about the other set that Stanley makes under their Bailey name? Both are made from Sheffield steel, both come with nice leather tool rolls, and both sets are now under $100. Are either of them good enough to grace your workbench? Let's have a look at them one at a time. The Sweetheart chisels are sold in sets of 4 or 8. I own the 4-piece set, which was about $73, and it includes 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch, the most common sizes for most shops. I also added a 5th chisel, an 1/8 inch, which I like to use, so it made mine a 5-piece set for around $100 total. I've heard people say that these new Stanleys look a lot like Lee Nielsen's chisels. They assume that Stanley is copying Lee Nielsen, but it's actually the other way around. Both brands are patterned after the pre-World War II Stanley 750s, which were perhaps the best Western-style chisels ever made. The new Sweethearts are very comfortable to hold and very well balanced. The rounded ends fit nicely in the palm, making them comfortable for paring. The socket design means the handle will only get tighter if you use a mallet on it. It's unlikely to split like some tang chisels might, but there's no metal ring on the end to keep the head from mushrooming like some vintage 750s had, so I wouldn't beat on them with anything more than a wooden mallet unless you want to ruin those nice comfortable handles. Stanley makes the steel in Sheffield, England, which has long been a place for high quality tool steels. They say it's a high carbon steel with some chromium mixed in, which makes it a bit harder and helps keep it looking nicer than the old school high carbon steels of the vintage 750s. They sharpen up quickly, they hold their edge very well. I was not disappointed in the quality of the steel at all. I would classify these new Sweethearts as semi-premium chisels. The new Stanley Bailey chisels come in a set of 5, from 1/4 inch up to 1.25 inches. They're about $64 on Amazon, making them significantly less expensive than the 4-piece Sweetheart, which was $73 and didn't include the largest 1.25 inch chisel. While the Sweethearts are socket chisels, the Baileys feature a metal tang that extends into the hardwood handle. But I've done a fair amount of pounding on these with a wooden mallet, and the brass ring at the base of the handle seems strong enough to prevent splitting. They also have another ring on the end of the handle to prevent mushrooming there as well. The Bailey steel is advertised as carbon chrome, which sounds pretty similar to what they said was the Sweetheart steel. Maybe there's a bit more chromium in it, I'm not sure. Overall,
I classify the Baileys as a great set for the weekend woodworker. If I had to choose between the two, I choose the Sweethearts, but they're not as far apart as the price would suggest. They're both good sets of chisels. The differences are in the design. Stanley makes the Sweetheart chisels for fine woodworking. The high carbon steel is soft enough for easy sharpening, but hard enough to hold an edge in most woodworking tasks. The handles are smaller and more comfortable for paring. The weight is in the steel end rather than in the handle itself, which makes them better suited for balancing on end, such as when dovetailing. However, the handle design isn't really suited for heavy mortising and chopping. On the other hand, the Bailey chisels are designed and marketed to contractors. I bought my set at a home center, in fact. The larger handles with the ringed ends are easier to hold for mortising and chopping, but less comfortable for paring and dovetailing. The steel itself seems to be pretty much the same between the two. Perhaps Bailey has a bit more chromium, maybe to stand up to the demands of a contractor a bit better. I really didn't see much difference in my workshop between the steels. Both tools suffer from the same deficiencies in fit and finish. Unlike Lie-Nielsen, which come flat and polished right out of the box, both the Sweethearts and the Baileys had some significant marks left behind by the grinding process. Expect to spend some time flattening the backs, especially with the Baileys, which I found it needed a bit more work to set up than the Sweethearts. Besides fit and finish, another area where both of these sets fall short as compared to high-end tools like the Lie-Nielsen is the side bevels. For dovetailing, you want as fine a side bevel as possible so you can get into the corners between your tails. Both the Baileys and the Sweethearts were inconsistent when it came to that. Some have flats as narrow as a 1/16 of an inch, others wider than an 1/8. It was a little disappointing, but not unexpected in this price range. So which one should you buy? I'd buy the Sweethearts because they're more comfortable and better balanced. But if your budget's a little tight, the Baileys are also an excellent set for less money, plus you get the large 1¼ inch chisel with the set, making it an even better deal. I'll put a link to both in the notes below the video so you can check them out for yourself and read what other people are saying. This is the Master Gauge Mini Magnetic Base, and it is deceptively simple. It holds a dial indicator on any ferrous metal surface, such as table saw, your jointer, bandsaw, lathe, drill press, you name it. Its rare earth magnetic base holds on tight. In fact, sometimes I use a couple of post-it notes to reduce the holding power so it's easier to remove. It's really well made and light on frills. It just tilts forward and back. That's about it. But the real value is in its size. You can put it just about anywhere, including inside machines to take precise measurements. You can even add a mini flashlight to use it to attach a light source in a tight space that you might be working, such as down inside your table saw, down in the motor of your car. It's one of those little things that you're going to find a million uses for. I'll put a link in the notes below this video so you can check it out for yourself. Brett, who designed the Hedgehog spiral featherboard, worked with the philosophy that the easier it is to use something, the more likely you are to use it. And that's definitely true with featherboards. I find the traditional style to be a little bit of a pain to set up. Not because they're difficult, but because they just kind of slow me down and so I'm less likely to use them. This thing is designed with a single knob and a single pivot point, so it can be set quickly and adjusted just as quickly as the width of your work changes. That's the benefit of that hedgehog-like shape. Instead of sliding side to side to adjust between wide and narrow boards, like a traditional featherboard, you just give it a twist. I've been using them at both the table saw and the router table for a while now, and I really like them. You can even stack two together for taller support. This is definitely something worth checking out for yourself. I'll put a link below this video. Another cool tool I came across recently are the combination squares sold by a company called iGaging. I use combination squares for every project. It's maybe the most versatile tool in my shop. iGaging is a small business based in California. They claim that their combination squares, which they have manufactured overseas to their own strict tolerances, are comparable to Starrett's at about 1/3 of the price. So let's see, are they really comparable? Well, the most important thing is, are they accurate? There are lots of tests you could run with machine plates and feeler gauges and all that good stuff, but I'm just a woodworker. I only do one test to check my square, and it's never failed me for woodworking purposes. I lay the square on a flat workpiece, and I mark along the edge with a marking knife. Then I flip the square over, put my knife in that first curve, move the square up to the knife, and while holding the knife against the rule, I scribe a second line. If I have one crisp line when I'm done, I know my square is accurate. It's not difficult to do this test at all, and it is a reliable way to judge whether a square is true enough for woodworking. By way of comparison, here's an old Stanley I picked up years ago. It's never really worked all that well, and as I expected, the test showed a deviation on that second scribe line. So this is not square. The Starrett, on the other hand, passed the test nicely, just as I would hope from a nearly $100 square. But the $34 iGaging produced the exact same results. I also tested the 12-inch square that comes with their center finder and protractor head kit. That one was true. Their 6-inch combination square was tested, and it was true. The 6-inch double square was tested. It was true. And the 4-inch double square was also tested and turned out to be true as well. So that's good news. We know that iGaging makes accurate tools. Now, how does the fit and finish compare to the Starrett? Here's where I saw some small differences. On the 12-inch square, both featured heavy cast handles. Actually, the iGaging casting is a little bit thicker than the Starrett. If you look closely, there are some very minor surface imperfections on the iGaging body. Nothing that would affect its performance. Those critical edges are all perfectly machined, as you'd expect. But I did notice a light blemish or two here and there. The knobs look different. The Starrett style with its 2 rings is easy to spot if you're a Starrett user. But in use, they feel a little different too. The Starrett feels a little bit smoother, especially when you tighten it down and then try to loosen it again. The iGaging knob is easy to work, but occasionally if you tighten it down, it can be a little more difficult with your fingertips to break it free to start loosening it again. The iGaging ruler has a more matte finish, which I personally preferred, but they're both precisely machined from hardened steel. Another nice thing about the iGaging square is they come in nice protective cases, while the Starretts just come in cardboard. Otherwise, they all seem to be well made, equally accurate for woodworking purposes. But if you're a woodworker looking for a reliable, well-made tool for about 1/3 of the price, you might want to check out that iGaging squares. So I'll put links to them in the notes below this video.
Hi, I'm John. I'm here at the Woodworking Show in Atlanta, and I'd like to show you my new triple play narrow cut dado set. It makes a 3/16 narrow dado. It also will do a 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, and 7/16 box joint, along with doing the undersized plywood cuts for undersized 1/4 inch plywood. Most standard dado sets will only do a 1/4 inch narrow dado. The new triple play box joint set can do the 3/16 narrow dado along with all the other box joint cuts, and now we can include this shim set, which will be able to do the undersized 1/4 inch grooves for undersized 1/4 inch plywood. It includes the 2 saw blades, a 1/16 chipper and a 1/8 chipper. We also include a set of shims. It's made with a C4 micrograin carbide, very durable, wear resistant graded carbide, which will stay sharp anywhere from 12 to 15 years for you. What the set does is it flips around with 2 different curves that you can make by flipping the blades around, and including the chippers will make all the different size width grooves you'd like to make. And the set comes in a complete box set just like this.
That wraps up the special edition of Cool Tools. Don't forget to use the affiliate links below if you want to check them out for yourself. Next week, we'll have another special edition with the coolest cheap tools from the past episodes. And watch for our special Drool Tools episode in a few weeks that will include some of the most expensive, drool-worthy woodworking tools out there. See you then. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.